Now that we have this finished shot, how do we get it out of After Effects? Well, the answer to that question really depends on what you need to do, because as the motion designer, this may be the end of the line for you, or at least the end of this step of the line, and you might be handing it off to an editor. In that case, you should know what format they need graphics delivered in. Or maybe you are the editor and you want to keep this a little bit more flexible so that you can jump back into After Effects and update some stuff very quickly. Or maybe you just need to get this shot in front of the eyes of somebody else, get their approval or their feedback on it. Well, I'm going to show you a few different ways of getting something out of After Effects for these different scenarios. First of all, let's say that this shot is done. It needs to be exported at high quality, a specific format, and just out of your hands. In that case, what you're going to do is have your composition open and come up to the composition menu and go down to Add to Render Queue. The keyboard shortcut for this is Control M. The Render Queue panel will automatically open and it comes down here at the base where your timeline is. This is where you can batch as many comps and as many versions of a comp as you want out of After Effects. And there are 3 settings that you need to pay attention to: the render settings, the output module, and the output to, or where we're actually saving this. Why don't we start there? I'm just going to click on the blue text, navigate to the folder I want to export to, and click Save. Now it's going to automatically take the name of the comp for the file name, but I could have put a custom file name in there before I click Save. Next are the render settings, and this defaults to best settings. Unless you're doing something very specific, you really don't need to touch anything in this menu. Best settings is almost always what you want. The output module is going to determine what kind of video file this is when it's exported. Now it's defaulting to H.264 with some custom settings for compression. That is a great option for just quickly getting it into somebody else's hands. So maybe you're putting it up on Dropbox or sending it through a direct message. You can go straight to a compressed MP4 that way. But this is probably not the way that an editor is going to ask you to deliver a graphic. So you can go to this list just by clicking on this little drop-down arrow, and there are some presets that you can work with. High quality is generally what I use when I want to export something at high quality. If I go into this output module settings, you'll see that the format is going to be a QuickTime file, so .mov. The format it's going to use, or the codec, is Apple ProRes 422. You could change this if you go into that menu. Maybe you want to use 4444 or something that supports an alpha channel. This is where you would change that codec setting. And then After Effects is intelligent enough to only output audio if it needs it. So it's set to auto, meaning if there's no audio in your comp, it's not going to put an audio track, but you can force it to be on or force it to be off right there. That all looks good, so I'm just going to cancel. I didn't want to change anything. And this is how I would export to hand it off to somebody. Since I'm happy with this, I could either click render or queue it in Adobe Media Encoder. If you want to use that so you can keep working in After Effects while things are rendering, that's a great option. But I'm just going to click on the render button. This won't take long. It's going to go through the whole scene and then give me that chime to let me know that this render is complete. I can open up this video file and see there it is, full quality, looks absolutely great, and I can hand that off to the editor. Let's say you are the editor and maybe you don't want to render out clips. You want to be able to just work directly in Premiere with this After Effects comp. Well, because both of these programs work so well together, you can do exactly that. So let's look at how that works. Well, over here in Premiere, I have this project file with all of these stock clips that I've been using opened up. And just like I can copy and paste things from Premiere into After Effects, I can easily drag and drop an asset from After Effects into Premiere. And what I can do is just click and drag this down to the Premiere icon on my taskbar. That'll open up the program, and then drag it directly into the project panel for Premiere. That will come in with what's called a dynamic link, Adobe Dynamic Link, that allows Premiere to read After Effects comps. You see that it has the .aep for After Effects project file. But I can drag this into my timeline just like any other clip. And if I zoom in on my timeline here a little bit and play back, we're going to go from seeing that clip to the clip we just had in After Effects. And it might take a little bit at first to render and process those frames, but usually after one playthrough, it's pretty good at just being able to play it back as if it was exported. What's amazing is that because of this dynamic link, I can jump back into After Effects and say, change this text to say the end instead of the finish line, save the project, go back to Premiere, and it immediately updates. So that's a fantastic workflow if you're the one responsible for the graphics and for the editing. It might not work for every single scenario, but that is a very convenient way of being able to update certain graphics very quickly. No exporting necessary. Part of being a motion designer is just being a good communicator and knowing when to ask the right questions so you can understand what is expected of you and how you should be delivering your files. The other half of it is actually knowing After Effects well enough to export in those specific formats so that you can be sure that you're not slowing down the process of whatever project you're working on. Don't forget to download the assignment PDF so you can try this out for yourself. Most of the time, you're going to be exporting video clips out of After Effects and importing them into a program like Premiere to finish off the project. But every now and then, you'll create a graphic that needs lots of different versions, like a lower third. Might need 10, 20, or even 100 different versions depending on how complex your project is. Wouldn't it be great if we could implement that lower third into Premiere and then edit the text right there without having to jump back into After Effects? That's exactly what Mogurts are for. I know that's a silly sounding name, but it's the file format for motion graphics templates from After Effects into Premiere. They allow us to make very customizable, very specific controls that we can adjust inside of Premiere and update our graphics without having to go back into After Effects. So let's take a look at how to do this. Having the ability to bring an After Effects project into Premiere is great. Jumping back and forth between the programs isn't that difficult and you're able to update things very quickly. But you can actually make a template out of an After Effects project file with specific controls that you want access to when you're editing in Premiere. These templates are called Mogurts. I know that's a funny name, but it's just short for Motion Graphics Templates. And we've already kind of started to use the features of After Effects we need to make these templates, the Essential Graphics panel. So what I've done is imported all three graphics that we've made into this single project file. So the full screen title, the lower third, and the standings chart. And we're going to turn each one of these into an editable template that you can use inside of Premiere and update however you want without needing to come back to After Effects. Let's start with the lower third. I'll open up the Essential Graphics panel under the window menu down to Essential Graphics, and this is going to take up a lot of room here. Now, I don't really need to see my project panel while I'm using the Essential Graphics panel, so I'm going to move it over there just so I have more space. I also don't think I need the Properties panel open right now, so I'm just going to close that. That way I have plenty of room to work here. Now, the way that this panel works is by dragging properties into it, and that will make them accessible in other places. We've already seen that with the map marker that we created for the checkpoints. Putting the source text property for that marker number in the Essential Graphics panel allowed us to change that property outside of that map marker comp. But we can also use it to edit things in Premiere. Now, I need to be able to see those properties, and in this comp, we just have 2 instances of the animation comp. So I don't have access to those source text properties. I need to go into this comp. So I'm going to double click into it and then find the text layer that I want to be able to adjust. So this one right here is the name of the contestant. So I'll open up that text layer, go into the text category, and there's the source text property. Now I could click and drag this up here, but that would be a mistake because I first need to choose which comp is the primary composition. And you can think of this as which comp should be rendered in Premiere. And in this case, it's the lower third comp because I want to preserve all of this animation. So first I need to select the lower third comp. This will be where all of the controls for this template live, and the comp that serves as the template in Premiere. Now I can jump back to this pre-comp, grab that source text, and drag it right up. And we have 2 text fields. The one on the left is the name of this property. It's going to default to whatever the layer name is. So I want to change this to name, so that when I'm in Premiere, I'll know this is where the name goes. And whatever I type in here is going to show up down here. So if you want to do something more generic, we could say Jane Doe, and that will be the template filler text. Now that's the only thing I'm able to change about the text, the actual text source. But if I go to Edit Properties, then I can choose some other things to enable. So if you wanted to give the editor the ability to change the font, you could just check this box. I don't want to do that though. I designed this lower third using that font, so I'm not going to enable that. But if there is a really long name, we might need to give the flexibility of changing the size of the font. So I'm going to check that box on. There's also faux styles. That's things like making it italic or bold when those aren't available in the font you're using. I don't want to do that either, so I'm just going to leave it. Click OK, and now we have a size control. So just like before, I can control this right in here. I don't want to do that, so I'll undo. But now the name control is built in. Let's do the same thing for the location. So I'll go into the text, find that source text, drag it up. I'll call this location, it's already adopted the same controls as I had before. I don't need to go in here and check that box on. And now both of those text fields will be editable. But we can make more than just properties editable in Premiere. We can actually change out this photo for the actual contestant. And to do that, I'm just gonna click and drag that entire layer up into the Essential Graphics panel, and that will make a new media replacement. So I'm gonna rename this to Profile Picture. That will be the label. And then the default setting is to scale to fill. Now that's probably not going to work, especially for this photo since I wanted it cropped in on the person's face, but we're actually gonna be able to edit this inside of Premiere, scaling it up, repositioning it however we want, so that's okay. But you have other options in here. Instead of filling, you can fit it, you can stretch it, which I don't recommend, or you can just say don't scale it at all. We'll leave it at scale to fill by default and adjust it in Premiere. Let's just go to the top here and actually give it a name because that's something I never did. This will be the name that shows up in Premiere when you're searching for the template. So I'll just call this Kite Surfing, and then I'll separate that and say lower third. So that will be the name of the template. And then I need to jump back to this lower third comp because remember, this is what it's going to use as the template. Whatever's in here is going to be transferred to the template, and I don't actually want this clip in the background showing up. This was really just temporary in After Effects for me to see what this lower third looked like on top of footage. So I'm just gonna delete this out of this project. I'm not hurting anything because this is not the original source project for the lower third. I just imported everything in here specifically for Mogert's. But because I don't have that footage in here, I definitely don't need this blank 12 frames at the start of the comp. So I'm gonna select both these layers and drag them back to the start of the comp. That way the template starts playing the lower third right away. Now, another thing this template doesn't do right now is animate off the screen. So I'm just gonna quickly do that before we export our template. I'll jump back into my comp, press U to bring up all the keyframes so I can see the properties that need to be animated, and then just quickly animate this off the screen in a similar way to how it came in. And I'm just gonna time lapse through this because it's just more repetition of what you've already seen. All right, so I've just aligned these keyframes to end at 10 seconds, just so it's a nice round number. I'll go back to my lower third comp and that's where it's going to end. And there's another really nice feature of Mogert's where you can create protected regions. So imagine that you stretch out the template's length in Premiere. That's going to retime everything in the comp. It's simply gonna just stretch the time remapping basically. We don't want that to happen on this front end though, because we want the animation timing that we set up to be preserved. So I'm just gonna go to after the animation is finished, so right about there, and set my work area for that range. Then I'll right click on the work area and say create protected region from work area, and that gets highlighted with blue. Then I'll go back here to the 10-second mark where the animation is finished, and I'll set my work area's endpoint there, and then back up to before this animation out starts to happen, so right about there, and press B. I'll also right click and protect that region, and finally go back to the start of the comp, press B to set my work area's endpoint, and trim that comp to be the length of my work area. That way I'll get a 10-second Mogert when I import it into Premiere, and both the in and out animation will be preserved if any retiming happens in Premiere. With all of that done, I can jump to my Essential Graphics panel. I can click the Set Poster Time button, and that will take a screenshot basically of this thumbnail and put it right up here. That's also what we'll see in Premiere as a preview for this template. All of my controls are set up, and I'm able to say Export Motion Graphics Template. After Effects will prompt me to save the project, so I'll save it. It'll do a little bit of work and then bring me this menu. Now I'm gonna send it straight to my local templates folder. This is just the default directory for Mogert's, and it will bring them up in the Essential Graphics panel in Premiere. But you can change this to a local folder or even a library if you're used to using those on Creative Cloud, which can make sharing these templates easier. With all of that done, I'll click OK. It'll export the template, and I can jump straight into Premiere where I've set up a project file with one of these clips just to use as an example. Go up to the window menu and open up the Essential Graphics panel here. And then just search right here for Kite. That'll probably bring up the template. Sure enough, there it is, the same poster frame as before, and I can click and drag that down directly into my timeline. And just like that, the graphic is displaying over here. If I go to the start of my comp, it's going to animate out exactly how it was inside of After Effects. And then once it hits that 10-second mark, it's going to animate off. But because we created those protected regions, let's say I wanted it to end right here. I can drag this back to that point in time, and the animation timing is going to be preserved. but all of that extra space in between is what will be stretched out. Now, let's select that template, and the Essential Graphics panel switches over to the edit mode, and this is where we can access all of the properties that we set up. So I could change this name to something more surfery. We'll say Stacy Slater. Okay, I could change the font size if I wanted to, but I think 58 was just fine. Location, that's editable as well. And here's the profile picture. And I could swap this out with another photo. So I'm going to quickly import another image. And let's choose one of the other surfers. So let's say this one right here. All I have to do to replace this is click and drag right over top of it and let go. And the photo is going to swap out. Now, obviously that is not lining up, but that's where all these controls come into play. So I can reposition it just by clicking and dragging on these numbers. I could scale it down and reposition this however I need to get his head lined up right where it should be. Now, this is a little bit difficult to do, especially when you can't just click and drag the image around, which is why if you just double click on the image, you are actually able to click and drag it around. Now, unfortunately, we don't have this in context with the other scene, but it is easier to make little adjustments and then just jump back to your other timeline. So I'll just go back one more time. I think I want to reposition that down into the right just a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty good. So we've built in a lot of flexibility with this lower third without ever having to go back to After Effects, and that is extremely valuable.